Well, good evening and welcome councillors, executive leadership team and community members. Councillor Don Henderson, I'm the Mayor of Hepburn Shire. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners. Hepburn Shire acknowledges the Dja Dja Wurrung as the traditional owners of the lands and waters on which we live and work. On these lands, Dja have performed age-old ceremonies, celebration, initiation and renewal. We recognise their resilience through dispossession and testament to their continuing culture and tradition, which is strong and thriving. Also acknowledge the neighbouring traditional owners, the Wurundjeri to our south-east and the Wadawurrung to our south-west, and pay our respect to all Aboriginal people, their culture and law. We acknowledge their living culture and the unique role they play in the life of this region. I now invite Councillor Riley to read the statement of commitment on behalf of the Council.
Thank you, Mayor. We, the councillors of Hepburn Shire, declare that we will undertake on every occasion to carry out our duties in the best interests of the community, and that our conduct shall maintain the standards of the Code of Good Governance, so that we may faithfully represent and uphold the trust placed in this council by the people of Hepburn Shire.
Thank you, Councillor. So tonight's meeting is being live streamed, we hope it is, YouTube channel, and we'll be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, council deliberations and voting. The meeting is also being recorded. It will be made available on Council's website as soon as practicable after the meeting. In accordance with Rule 104.2 of our governance rules, a person, including any representative, must not operate photographic, audio or video recording equipment or any other recording device at any council meeting without first obtaining the consent of the chairperson. Council supports a welcoming, respectful and safe environment for members of the community who participate at council meetings regarding issues that are important to them. Under the governance rules, members of the public present at the council meeting must not be disruptive during the meeting, interrupt proceedings. I also remind everyone that the local government decision-making, unlike state and federal government, does not afford the benefit of parliamentary privilege, and no protection is afforded to councillors and council officers. Comments made in meetings which are subsequently challenged in a court and determined to be slanderous. So we now move on. And we have our officers in attendance. Bradley Thomas, Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Bruce Lucas, Director of Infrastructure and Delivery. Ms. Brooke Holmes, up at the end there, who's the Director of Performance and Transformation. Mr. Ron Torres, who is the Director of Development and Community. Ms. Amy Boyd, who's the Manager of Planning and Building. Mr. Chris White, the Manager, Technology and Transformation, and Ms. Rebecca Smith, the Manager of Governance and Risk. So we have to the rear, I assume, toilets.
Yes.
And
Other side.
the other side. And we have, if anybody should happen to have a problem, we'll assemble outside. And please don't leave the area so that we won't go looking for you in the building. We do have a problem, assemble outside whilst we pick you up. Do we have any apologies? No. Mr. Thomas, do we have any apologies? No, not from staff, not from councillors. Declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors, does anyone have a conflict of interest? Declare. There are none. If any should arise during debate, the onus is upon the councillors to declare them. Yeah, officers, if you're present, are you when you have any conflicts tonight? Thank you. So we now move to item 6, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. The minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 17th of December 2024, previously circulated to councillors, be confirmed. We have an officer's recommendation before us and I'm in search of a motion. Do I have a mover? Moved. Councillor Hewitt, seconded Councillor Cornish.
I'm
Anything?
moving the officer's recommendation. Mayor.
Any comment, councillors, on these? I'll put it. Those in favour? Those against? Declare that carried unanimous.
Sorry, I'll abstain.
You're abstaining?
Yep, wasn't
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark is abstaining. I understand that Councillor Clark wasn't at the last meeting, so he wasn't here to. We now come to public participation time. And we have no petitions have been received for tonight's meeting. No requests to address council have been received for tonight's meeting. We do have some questions. What I'll do is I'll read out the responses to the questions taken on notice from the last ordinary meeting and respond to new questions received in accordance with council's governance rules. So there's none taken on notice. So we now hear questions received in accordance with council's governance rules. And question 1 is Mr. John Brereton in person. So Mr. Brereton, if you'd like to come and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to put 2 questions to you. As you heard, my name is John Brereton. I'm simply a concerned ratepayer living in Trenton. I've got 2 very simple questions, but in the interest of transparency, I put them to you. So the first question is, how are you proposing to address $4 million shortfall in the cash budget? And the second question is, how much will the proposed rate increase reduce that shortfall? Where I'm coming from is because my concern is that in part the problem is going to be resolved by simply defaulting on budgeted expenditure for things like infrastructure, roads and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brereton. Mr. Brereton, the financial vision adopted by council on the 10th of September 2024 identified steps that will be taken to address the shortfall. Financial vision is available on the council's website here. And it's the second question as well, and perhaps a bit of an explanation. The 7% proposed rate cap variation, if approved by the Essential Services Commission, will reduce the shortfall by 1.4 million. This requires the council to find permanent savings to the operational budget of 2.6 million. Now, Mr. Brereton, what's happening is the councillors are involved in a series of workshops to discuss how we might do that, the least impact on services without cutting services. That will involve becoming more efficient in some areas, cutting some programs, maybe putting some officers to do dual tasking, those sorts of issues. Everything top to the bottom of the organisation is being dealt with. So, and that's ongoing work. We had a workshop later yesterday to discuss that. So it won't be just adding to the rate bill without us taking some action early. So but do have a look at the website. There's a fair bit of information there, and there will be more information come out as we're able to release it. And we'll be having a deliberative panel and having some public discussions about these issues as well. So question 3, and I'll apologise if I get this wrong, from Ms. Rosie Ngallina.
Yeah, questions 3 to 4 are both from Rosie. Question 3 is, what is being done to fix the Clunes public pool and a time frame for it being reopened to the public?
The council is currently investigating the equipment and operations of the Clunes pool and the chlorination dosage system. specialist report pending. Council is also looking at improvement opportunities for the operation of the chlorination system, operation as part of the necessary repairs to minimise further risks, along with additional training for staff on the operation of the chlorination system. Reopening the pool on the actions being completed, and the specialist report is expected later in this week. We have a question 4 from the same person.
Was this the same issue that occurred last year? And if so, why wasn't it addressed during the winter months when the pool was closed?
Okay. Whilst the two incidents are similar in nature, they relate to different parts of the chlorination system, the pipe network. Repair works were completed following last year's incident, and we're awaiting the independent specialist report to inform future requirements.
Question 5 for Ms Cynthia Gouldy. Please explain why the income statement demonstrates a surplus of 15.8 million, which is better than budget, and how does this relate to a rate increase?
So the response is, this is a fairly short version. It is the correct version, but I need some bit more teasing out. This year to date, the adjusted underlying surplus for the period 31st of December 2024, the main consideration being that the full year of rates income is raised at the start of each financial year. This is fairly consistent with the budgeted surplus as of December 2024 of 13.9 million, and will reduce towards the end of the financial year. The rate increase relates to the financial year 2025-26. That's subject to the approval of a higher rate cap application by the Essential Services Commission. So it's a timing issue, and the figures do add up, but it is a timing issue as to when our rates come in and work actually gets done.
And also question 6 from Ms Gouldy, what services will be cut if the Shire has a deficit of $4 million?
So councillors, as I said before, councillors are working with council officers to determine what changes will be considered to reduce our operating budget before development of the council plan, annual budget and long-term financial plan. These draft documents are expected at the end of April for community consultation.
Questions 7 and 8 from Faye McGee. At the halfway point of the financial year, why has council only spent $637,000 on roads compared to a full year budget of $3.6 million? And in the interest of community safety, why aren't roads given a higher priority?
Okay, well, the response to that is that major road construction activities are typically scheduled over the summer period, programmed for delivery in the second half of the financial year. Accordingly, the majority of major roadwork projects are being progressed and will significantly increase expenditure between January and June 2025. This is consistent actually with prior years. So once again, it's a timing issue. It's more expenditure when the what we call the road season is up and running.
Question 8, item 8.8 on the agenda indicates that the Chanton Lane road repair is on hold due to matters relating to native vegetation, which will preclude completion by the 30th of June 25. Can council reassure the community that this will be resolved in time for completion by the end of June 26?
Okay, so allowing for the resolution of these items prior to planning approval, commencement, program for construction still indicates that the project is anticipated to be completed before the end of June 2026. Road will continue to be monitored and managed by Hepburn Shire Council and Macedon Ranges Shire Council in the interim.
Question 9 and the last for tonight, Mayor. Dr. Jennifer Beecham, how will the Hepburn Together consultation be conducted to ensure a useful, constructive input from the community, and who will select the community members for the deliberative panel and on what criteria?
Okay. Community engagement in relation to the Hepburn Together project will be in 3 phases. Feedback gathered through community engagement already undertaken from Financial Vision and Future Hepburn in particular, being fed into council workshops. Conducting a deliberative panel, an independent consultant, conversation company have been engaged to assist officers and councillors in the panel, including their expertise in the selection of the panel to ensure a representative sample of the community, including age, gender and location. Draft documents such as the council plan, financial plan, asset plan, budget and others will be available for community comment in late April, early May. We now move on to item 8, which is officers' report. We have the consideration of a planning application, Plan 22/0259-12, Benina Street, Hepburn Springs. Development and Director of Development and Community. And Ms. Boyd, manager, please introduce us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Councillors, tonight is an application before you for an 8-lot subdivision at 12 to 14 Benina Street, as we've just heard. This application's been with council for some time. It was originally submitted as an 11-lot subdivision, and before you tonight is an 8-lot subdivision. Referrals to key agencies and internal departments, as well as advertising to adjoining and surrounding residents, has led to significant change to the application and what's before you tonight. The lots are a mix of sizes, with the smallest being 560 square metres and the largest on just over 1,100 square metres. This is considered to provide a mix of lot sizes within an area that has a range of dwelling types and sizes, but acknowledge this is a change for the area in that it is a battle axe development, which is not traditionally seen. Of significance, the site has a number of large established trees that were originally proposed to be removed, all but 3. This was considered to be a poor outcome, and significant discussion and review with the applicant has been able to deliver an outcome that now sees the majority of those trees protected and retained on Lot 8 in particular. A building envelope change was required, and there are significant conditions proposed if a permit was to be granted for the protection of those. It is acknowledged that 12 objections were received and addressed issues around amenity, neighbourhood character, vegetation loss, stormwater, emergency management, and vehicle access, plus a number of others. Council officers have placed considerable weight in those objections and worked with the applicant to address these. Overall, it is considered the proposal is generally consistent with the policies and objectives of the planning scheme. A number of conditions, as outlined in the report, address many of those concerns of the residents, including emergency management, access and changes to the access arrangements, vegetation protection, vegetation and landscaping along the common property driveway to provide a softening for the residents to the south, relocation of waste management, including a waste management plan, and a stormwater retention plan to be submitted to ensure stormwater is managed appropriately on the site. It is therefore recommended that the application be supported and a notice of decision be issued to grant a permit, subject to a number of conditions as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions?
Yes, sir.
Councillor Hood?
Boyd, the topic of access to emergency vehicles, whether it be a fire truck or an ambulance along that battle axe driveway, it's only 8 metres wide. Does that comply with the CFA's requirements to get a truck in there and out safely?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hood. Yes, the application was referred to the CFA. They have granted conditional approval to the application. Condition 34 of the draft permit conditions does require some changes at the end of the battle axe driveway to ensure that trucks can get in and out in a forwards direction. 4.5 metres is considered what is required, so an 8 metre width is more than satisfactory.
Further question?
Yeah, can I just clarify that, please, then? So is the CFA saying that, are you saying with amendment to what's before us, if amended, they can get a truck in and out in a forward direction?
That's correct. CFA require to that to be shown on the plans with turning movements demonstrated, but they are satisfied that can be achieved.
Is that denoted on the plans that we've got in front of us, or is that subject to a change that is yet to be made?
That's outlined through condition 34 of the draft permit, that those plans need to be submitted should a planning permit be issued.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Boyd. Thank you for the report. There are just a number of community concerns which I hope you can speak to, which particularly talk around stormwater, rubbish collection, and Councillor Lewis already asked the other question I had. So could you talk, I'm just used to see how the stormwater and the rubbish collection would work.
In through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Waste collection, there is a proposal for a private waste collection. So conditions on the permit require a private waste collection strategy to be submitted. It's not considered reasonable that you would have 8 dwellings with a narrow frontage to put all of their bins out. So a private collection will be required. We've also, in discussions with the applicant, ensured that the location in which those bins are stored is off the shared common property boundary with the subject site and the neighbours to the south, so that there isn't that noise impact. They need to be within the subject site themselves. We've also included a condition that the waste management strategy will form part of a section 173 agreement, so it's enduring, and that it can be then enforced if that's not complied with into the future. With regards to your second question around stormwater management, the engineering team have reviewed this application a number of times through its iterations and are comfortable that stormwater management can be addressed across this site. There is a requirement through subdivision that any additional stormwater is collected and directed out to the legal point of discharge, in this case Venina Street, and that a stormwater management plan will need to be submitted to detail exactly how that's going to occur. There's a range of options for that. It could be through a pump system, it could be through some detention on site and then release it back. It could also be through tanks on site for individual dwellings going forward. That the officers are satisfied that that can be achieved, and similar to the CFA access, that stormwater management plan needs to be provided to council's satisfaction should a permit be issued.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Dry. Did I miss you, Councillor? Okay, sorry.
Through Mayor. Ms. Boyd, question of amenity obviously comes up, and there seems to be quite a bit of concern through the objections around the existing enjoyment of that area as being larger lots, wildlife diversity, and an expectation that will be maintained. So I know that there's been some efforts to negotiate with the applicant around the reduction of lot numbers, but a reduction of 1 seems to be a fairly small concession. I'm just wondering how we can respond to the objections that were actually laying some of those concerns.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. To clarify, this did start as an 11 lot subdivision, so it has had some concessions through the time. I acknowledge that this is a change in that it is that battle axe arrangement. However, the lot sizes are fairly consistent with that neighbourhood as a whole, particularly as you go further east and to the south. They are still considered to be good sized allotments for single dwellings, which is what we anticipate. We have worked hard to ensure that that 8 metre width allows for emergency vehicle access, cars and the landscaping along that southern boundary, and the conditions as drafted require at least 60% of that driveway has a landscaping outcome. So rather than it being a linear driveway, we'd expect to see a bit of curve to get some denser plantings. That's been a conversation. The other thing we've done to try and reduce the number of vehicle movements on that driveway is it was proposed that lot 1 would have vehicle access off that common property. Through the discussions and through the permit, lot 1 will now be accessed off Venina Street, which doesn't seem a lot, but it does actually reduce up to 10 vehicle movements a day if it was a 2-car garage, 3-bedroom house. So we have also done that. So acknowledge that it is a change. However, it does provide diversity of lot sizes. It provides more housing in an area that we have strategically identified as an area we'd like to see more housing. And we believe we've managed the amenity of this area the best that we can within the planning scheme.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. External agencies, what external agencies have you consulted and what was the result? And the second question is, although the subdivision has been reduced from 11 to 8, I think, how is that going to improve the vegetation or take care of the environmental issues there? Because even removing a few lots, that's very specific, but vegetation occurs across the whole lot. Will there be extra plantings? Are there any mature trees or anything of concern on the other lots?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillor Cornish. Start with the vegetation. That has probably been one of the most significant issues that council has worked through in this process. And lot 8 in particular is where the large stand of more mature trees are. Vegetation reports have been submitted as part of the application and have identified that there are trees with high retention value and trees that we wanted to see retained. The building envelope originally on lot 8 was at the northern side of that lot, which meant that those trees needed to be removed in their entirety. So we've worked with the applicant to look at whether or not vegetation loss can be dealt with in a different way, and in particular through some trimming and some lopping to get greater separation of canopy cover, which means that the trees can actually be retained. And through that process and the relocation of the building envelope to the south of lot 8, we've been able to achieve that outcome, acknowledging there is still trees that need to be removed, but on balance, it's a much better outcome. We are in a residential zone, and vegetation loss, unfortunately, is one of those factors. In terms of referral agencies, this application has gone to the CFA. It's gone to both Goulburn Murray Water and Central Highlands Water as the water authorities. It's gone to Powercorp, and it's gone to our internal engineering team to look at the drainage and access arrangements. They've all consented, subject to various changes throughout the process. All agencies are now comfortable.
That's all good. Are you finished? No, okay.
If you don't mind me.
I don't mind, no.
With the canopy reduction, I don't think councils usually do this, but what I'm concerned about is also the reduction of wildlife, birds. You need a canopy and an ecosystem for birds and other animals. There have been any, do we do any of that sort of study? Do we know what happens in that region as far as rules go? Because I think reducing a canopy will affect the ecosystem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, arguably it will change the way flora and fauna and wildlife move in that area, where we have vacant paddocks in these suburbs. That's where the animals tend to go, and then they move into different spots. The canopy reduction is a relatively new thing that we're doing within the planning team, because the alternative is the complete loss of the tree. So this way we're able to retain those trees through some thinning. And I'll note that there was 2 trees on the block that were 4.5 metres apart. So we're talking about a 0.5 metre thinning of that tree, in which then 2 very large gum trees are able to be retained. We have got landscaping conditions proposed within there. So there will be vegetation that goes back into the site. And then there is, where the building envelopes are shown, there's still very large backyards within each of these lots for the ability for more planting into the future. We do, however, need to balance that against being within a bushfire prone area, and we need to be mindful of those tensions between providing safe and appropriate built form and also then the vegetation within those settings. So yes, it's a loss and it's a change, but on balance, it has more, I guess, positives than it does negatives. And we certainly believe that the retention of those trees through the trimming is a far better outcome than their total loss.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Boyd. Well, it's an unusual one in the sense that we're asked to give a permit for an 8-lot subdivision, but without any plans for the buildings. What are the houses on it? What are there design conditions that that you're recommending that will ensure that the look of 8 properties or 8 houses is in line with each other, or in sympathy with each other, but also in sympathy with the environment? Because I'm imagining that you could have 8 different houses, 8 different looks. So what are the conditions, or what are the planners recommending that would prevent that occurring?
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor, a really great question. What we have before us is an 8-lot vacant land subdivision, so council officers haven't turned their mind necessarily to what the built form outcomes will be, other than there are building envelopes that will control their setbacks. There are building regulations that will control their height, so maximum double story, but there are no specific built form controls other than the BEL ratings, so that each dwelling will need to be constructed to a particular BEL rating through this process. But there is no additional consideration there, purely because that's not what's before us. We need to assess the subdivision as a vacant.
So, can I have a follow-up question? So, will then anyone wishing to build on the subdivided lots be required to obtain a planning permit, and would then address some of these concerns?
They may, depending on the site cut that is required for each of those lots. It may trigger a permit under our environmental significance overlay. The bushfire management overlay has been dealt with through this permit process, so the BEL ratings are set. If there is a variation to those, or the building envelope variations, they would then trigger planning permits. We would look at that built form outcome. There are, just trying to think if there are other conditions. Not at this point. I think that's covered it. I don't think there's anything else. Sorry.
Just a question from me, Ms. Boyd. What happens when we're in a bushfire attack level, such as down there, and we have state government legislation that allows people to clear trees? Right, now we said we've retained those trees. Can that 173 agreement cover those trees, or is that a separate issue? Bushfire rating, and could those trees at a future date be removed by anyone building a house as of right under those bushfire regulations?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's a good question. The building envelopes have been designed so that they won't require that's already been approved to be removed. But going forward, there could be an application made to alter or remove those trees, but there will be a 173 that triggers them to come back to us for that consideration.
Putting aside the bushfire regulations about rating, say about blocks that are less than 2,000 square metres in a residential zone, have the right to clear trees.
So if on a vacant lot where there's no application before us and it's for a single dwelling, vegetation can be removed within 10 metres of a dwelling at the moment without the need for a permit. And there are also provisions for new dwellings that vegetation be removed as part of that defendable space outcome. We've worked through this to create those building envelopes so that that's been contemplated as part of this process. The additional removal need to come back through council because we've put those provisions in place now.
Thank you. Councillor Hood.
Just like a clarification, Ms. Boyd, from a response that you gave to Councillor Hewitt. Is it the case that some or all of the 8 lots would have a double-storey building?
Yes, it's possible.
Right, any other councillor? If not, there's a recommendation for us. Councillor having court notice of planning application. This be given under section 52 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Having considered all matters required under section 60 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, issues a notice of decision grant a planning permit for the subdivision of land in 3 lots within the neighbourhood residential zone, fire management overlay and environmental for significance overlay 1214 Fenina Street, Hepburn, subject to conditions as outlined in the report. I'm in search of a motion. Have a mover?
I'm happy to move it in the form of the officer's recommendation.
You, Councillor Hockey. Seconder.
Yep.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Hockey. To speak.
No,
Councillor Clark.
No, I'm very comfortable.
Any other councillor?
I'll speak.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms Boyd. Again, councillor Hockey, I'm impressed with the thoroughness and the negotiation that's gone into this application, and also the willingness of the applicant to do the negotiation and to shift it from an 11-lot subdivision to an 8-lot subdivision. I acknowledge that, like you said, that there's a change, is a change for down there, but I'm also conscious that our structure plan, our future Hepburn planning has supported the need for a range of housing lots and a range of building envelopes, and also a strong response from the community about the importance of providing infill rather than moving into and protecting farming land. So whilst I acknowledge that it's been probably difficult, not a difficult, but an application that's caused some concern in the local area, I would acknowledge the work that you've done and the work that the applicant's done as well in coming up with this recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Hood?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. On balance, very much recognising the need for housing across the Shire. I struggle with this one. I fully appreciate and value infill development over encroaching onto farmland or other rural forest land. And I fully appreciate the need for a diversity of housing stock and lot sizes. But the loud and clear message that I heard right across the Shire in our town structure plan work was the value that the community and I put on the character and amenity of our rural settings and rural towns. And the bit that I really struggle with is either a court bowl or a battle axe driveway. To me, they are very, very urban and therefore not consistent or sympathetic with the character and amenity and the rural setting of our towns. I've also heard tonight, and thank you for the clarification on emergency access, that the application before us has been described as generally consistent. That's not good enough. We need better than that. This needs a bit more work and therefore I can't support it.
Absolutely. Councillor Cornish.
It's pretty simple to me. Before us here is a subdivision. We don't have any houses on it at the moment. When it comes a time where they do, we'll have a bit more of a say as well as to what is suitable in that area. The explanation about the vegetation is a good one, but koalas need to jump from tree to tree. So, you know, you can't have everything, but at the same time we need to encourage housing. That's in our Shire and many other council areas. There isn't enough here for me to say no to this, but no, it is what it is, but it's a subdivision that we're deciding on today. So I'll just take it a step at a time.
Any other councillor? Councillor Dryling.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm just hearing other councillors on some of these issues and feeling some sympathy around the complexities of this application and considering the weight of effort that's gone in to actually reach some compromise and agreement around what is a fit and sort of subdivision. I think that it's the environmental aspect is that Councillor Cornish has mentioned, I think it's still of concern, and I would like to see some improvements there. Likewise with Councillor Hood's comments around the way that the Battle Axe sort of design is somewhat rudimentary, and it's not a very creative response potentially in some ways to the block. However, we are in a housing crisis, and as much as I would like to see more affordable housing in the Shire, and I'm not sure this is going to be particularly affordable for the type of people that we need to be looking after, we do need more housing, and there certainly is a directive coming loud and strong from the Victorian government that we need to be supporting it as well. So on that basis, I'm supportive of this application, but with the caveats that I've mentioned.
Right. So councillor Hockey, there has been someone speak against the adoption, so you have a right of reply if you wish to exercise.
No, I'd only repeat that I thought the report was just very impressive and spoke to a long, protracted process of ticking all the boxes. That's all I'd say.
Thank you. All right. No further. So I'm now going to put it. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? I'll declare it carried. So that's Councillor Clark, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hockey, Councillor Riley, Councillor Hewitt, Councillor Henderson for, and Councillor Hood against. Carried. Right, 8.2, deferral waste service charge cap variation. Introduced by Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Mayor. In September 2024, Council resolved to submit an application to the Essential Services Commission for a rate cap variation for the 2025-2026 financial year that ensures the waste service charges comply with the new local government ministerial guidelines, noting that that would be revenue neutral to and of no net cost to ratepayers. This decision was based on new ministerial good practice guidelines for local government service rates and charges being released, with the rate cap variation being required to ensure compliance with guidelines. Subsequently to September 2024, it was clear that within the sector, there's widespread concern with the guidelines. It's now clear that the vast majority of councils will not be compliant in 2025-2026, and with the appointment of a new Minister for Local Government, these guidelines are being reviewed. Therefore, it may well be prudent to defer the application to a future financial year. And just for clarity, this is not the application to the Essential Services Commission for a rate cap variation that we've spoken about in relation to dealing with the financial, the $4 million shortfall where we need to find the savings. This is just related to waste, and it relates to the previously introduced ministerial good practice guidelines. And so given those changes, the report suggests that we should defer it to a future financial year, because the environment's actually very uncertain at the moment with the state government.
So councillors, if anyone wants to direct, I take this being directed to the Chief Executive Officer. So any questions? Councillor? Yes, Councillor Hood.
This appears to be quite straightforward, but for the record, the council to be planning to be non-compliant with the ministerial direction, what, if any, are the consequences or implications for that non-compliance?
Thank you. There's no penalties. The guidelines are as they are guidelines. They're not legislative in nature, and the minister may have asked some questions of why we haven't adhered to the particular guidelines, but I can assure councillors that'll be the case for the vast majority of Victorian councillors, and this will continue our advocacy work with peak bodies to push back on the guidelines. But the waste charges that council will ultimately adopt in the budget will be able to stand, will form part of ratepayers' notices and will be required to be paid.
Follow-up question, if I may.
Yeah.
Can Mr. Thomas shed some light on the advocacy to date? When are we likely to get a decision, and what might you speculate the decision, the clarity being?
I can comment that there has been significant advocacy from right across the sector. Councils are concerned by the definitions that are included in the waste guidelines. And for examples, I think it's prudent to understand that the guidelines would exclude things like transfer stations and exclude things like public bins from waste charges, and that's why there is the concern in the sector. Majority of peak bodies have been involved in various meetings with the various ministers, and both the local government minister and the Minister for Environment, because without changes to the guidelines, it has considerable impact on the delivery of state government's circular economy legislation. So Minister has been a change in the local government minister, and I think that renews fresh hope within the sector that there might be some understanding and working through. So the minister's certainly happy to listen to the concerns of the sector on this item. We don't have a time frame, and as part of, I suppose, the deferral tools, there is clarity over the coming weeks, months, it may be a year. We'll work through that process.
Councillor,
Thank you.
any other councillor? Other councillors? Well, we've got a motion for us. That council, one, defers an application to the Essential Services Commission in relation to waste service charges until greater clarity, ministerial good practice guidelines for local government service rates and charges is provided by the state government. And two, continues working with peak bodies to seek a review of the guidelines. I'm in search for a motion. Councillor Hood,
Move the officer's recommendation.
do we have a seconder? Councillor Cornish. Councillor Hood.
I think it's quite straightforward, Mayor. We are obligated to make evidence-based decisions, so to go ahead with an application now, not having any clarity on what the minister or the state government intends to do in this space would be problematic, I would argue, and would be deferred.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cornish.
Just good governance to defer it. Thank you to our CEO. The report.
Any other councillor wish to speak? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? So that's Councillor Clark, Hood, Cornish, Hockey, Riley, Stewart and Henderson. Carried unanimously. Thank you.
So before you go to the next item, Mayor, it looks like we've got a potential fix to the live streaming, but not something that we can put in place and test tonight. So we'll just continue with the meeting. We are recording it. And so we will put the recording of this meeting. So for councillors and community, please act like we're live streaming, because effectively we will be. The recording will be able to go up tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, there might be a question from councillors on that, maybe.
Has the council, in the meantime, put a message on our Facebook page to say that
Appropriate communications have gone on to let people know that, and we'll follow it up as well in the morning. And so just unfortunately one of those things sometimes with IT, but we'll work through that.
Okay. Councillor Hood, any questions? Okay, 8.3, quarter two finance reports 2024-25. Director of Performance and Transformation going to answer any of those, and for Councillor Hockey to introduce this one.
So the December 2024 quarterly finance report outlines the financial results for 6 months ended 31st December 2024, along with a comparison to the amended budget adopted by the council. That's inclusive of carry forwards from the 2023-2024 It includes a summary of council's financial performance in addition to the 2020-25 financial year up until 31st December 24, and an update on each special and capital project as at 31st December 2020. The current financial position needs to be read in the context of council's financial plan contained within the 2024-25 budget and the adopted financial vision as of 10 September 2020. Further section in the report details budget adjustments to the 24-25 amended budget with commentary noting that it has minimal or nil net effect to the overall budget position.
Thank you, councillor. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Hood.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Question for officers. I'm noting that outstanding debtor balances are considerably higher than the same time last year. Correspondingly, our cash balances are lower. Are officers satisfied that that a lot of our residents and ratepayers would be struggling under cost of living pressures? Are we satisfied that the flexibility we offer to ratepayers to pay rates on an instalment basis, is that effective?
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Hood, yes. With regards to the arrangements we have available for our residents to seek support if they are facing financial hardship, we are confident they exist, and there are very good methods which any residents can get into contact with our teams. We haven't had a significant increase in those. Rather, we are seeing they remain at that same point, and instead are managing this as a I guess a debt recovery process, having conversations with those residents who are choosing not to pay rates.
Thank you.
Any other councillor? Councillor Hood, another question?
Yes, if I may, and it's might be a bit of a long-winded question, but I'm seeking from management an indication on the outlook for the second half of the financial year. I'm mindful that at the half-year mark, we're slightly ahead of budget, but that's entirely attributable to a lot of the operating costs, materials and services being the same value under budget. And also, as it's historically the case, the capital expenditure is very low in the first half of the year, all of which would suggest that there's a lot to be done, certainly in a financial sense, in the second half year. I'm also asking the question in the context that in a departure from normal practice, the recommendation has been not to conduct a mid-year budget, mid-year review of the budget this year. Given that context, what is the outlook for the second half year?
Through you, Mayor. So councillor, probably two responses, I guess, to that question. You're right. One is we are very much, looking at the budget as being on track to materially come in as we expect. So yes, whilst there is, what might be perceived as an underspend, it's one that we would anticipate and have confirmation that our capital program is on track or relates to the potential amendments that we've already flagged as well. The figures that we're seeing there are as at the end of December, noting that we're already the 25th of February because of the timing of how things go. So, tracking of that budget occurs on a monthly basis. So we do believe that we will come in on track for the budget. The second part of the question that you had there was with regards to not putting forward any amendments. And I guess for the same reason, we really are managing the budget very considerably, given the impact of financial vision, as we've indicated, and have spent significant amounts of time understanding the position. So we're being really mindful of that and monitoring it. And same too, because we don't have an expected surplus there within our budget, there is no opportunity for us to seek any community budget bids, as we might have in previous years. The financial position and the outlook that we've indicated doesn't support that as being actually prudent approach. So we are, I guess, taking a very cautious and considered approach to how we're managing the budget, but we're very confident on how that is tracking.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My question did relate to the budget review process and the lack of an opportunity for community to engage this year. And I know that you have hardly already answered that, but I guess further that, on what basis are we within our legislative sort of bounds to not allow community some sort of input into?
Well, I'll take that one, Councillor Dryley. So, and just for confirmation, we haven't run a public process around a mid-year review, and certainly not in my time here over 6 years. So we have done a mid-year review often in the past out of necessity, given councils needing to respond to natural disasters. That's particularly what's been the major reason for doing it. It's not a requirement to do. What the requirement is to report quarterly, as we have. So in the past, council's obviously been in a position where we've needed to respond to the natural disasters and therefore the increased cost of that. And we've undertaken through a mid-year review with councillors deferral or cancellations of some projects. And I think that's really important to note that we haven't changed anything in terms of we haven't cancelled a public process. We haven't done something that we haven't not done something that we've done in the past. Effectively, there's a number of budget changes there in terms of grants process, which is consistent with what we've done. And effectively, we're trying to stick to budget in the last 6 months, so which we would expect. And also really important to note that council has made some really significant decisions around the financial vision, and they are being implemented as we speak and leading into the council plan. So I'm sure both councillors, as you're well aware of a community, that the finances of Hepburn Shire are really managed very tightly and almost on a daily basis. And there's lots of community consultation going on the budget as we speak.
Further questions? No. Yes, Councillor Hood.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Thomas and Holmes, for the responses. I come back to the active and tight management. Notwithstanding the fact that we've had a relatively quiet first half year financially, it's still the case that unrestricted cash balances at 31st of December are negative $840,000. Will this tight ongoing management get cash back to positive figure by 30 June?
The short answer to that is yes, because that's what council's adopted budget provides for. Councillors and community are well aware. There's lots of things that get taken into account in the unrestricted cash, and it's not unusual for councils to have a negative unrestricted cash. And you touched on it earlier, councillor, in terms of a high level of debtors at December. We hope to see some improvement and that really coming back. But we're on track as Holmes spoke about hitting budget. We hit budget. That's an unrestricted cash positive figure. And remembering council ultimately have made some fundamental decisions that will significantly improve the unrestricted cash, but into 25-26. So we've been really clear that the 30th June 25 position will be line ball. It'll be really close. That's to be expected. That's what council ultimately budgeted for, and seeing significant improvement post 25-26.
Any further questions, councillors? No further questions. I've got a motion before us. The council notes the financial position and performance 6 months ending 31st of December 2024, including the special and capital project, and 2, approves the budget adjustments for 2024-25 amended budget as detailed in the report. Council's not in search for a motion. The motion.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hood, do we have a seconder? Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Hood.
Yeah, happy to note the financial position and the statements, and I take some reassurance from Mr. Thomas and Ms. Holmes' comments about the necessity for ongoing diligent management of that, particularly from a cash perspective. Without wanting to jinx ourselves, we know that it only takes one fire or storm or flood to wipe out whatever small cash buffer we have, if we have a buffer at all. So that is quite precarious. So I appreciate that officers are diligently watching the books. And I'm happy to note the position at December and the outlook that's been described.
Thank you, councillor.
Oh, just to,
Right.
yeah.
What councillors, any other councillor? Oh, all right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? That's councillor Clark, councillor Hood, councillor Cornish, councillor Ewan, councillor Hockey, councillor Dryly, and councillor Henderson. Thank you. Okay, 8.4. The report to council on temporary extended financial delegations. Chief Executive Officer to answer this one and introduced by councillor Dryly.
Mayor, under the extended delegation set by the resolution of council on the 16th September 24, the executive officer was authorised to enter into a contract or incur expenditure value of $750,000 inclusive of GST for the period from the 17th of September to the 26th of November 24. During this period, no such contracts or expenditure incurred was entered into. It resulted in being above the current delegation of $330,000 inclusive of GST. Temporary increased delegation was not utilised, mainly due to planning of officers bringing contract approvals to council prior to beginning the election period and a number of tender processes underway.
Councillor Dryly. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Hood.
When will financial delegations next be reviewed?
In the next 2 to 3 months as we review all delegations to council. So we hope that'll come to council either in the March or April council meeting.
Yeah. Any other councillor? No other councillor? Okay, well, we've got you can see the motion there before you, councillors. Any questions, further questions? Okay, we're looking for recommendation. Council notes that no decisions were made under the extended financial delegation based over the election period. I'm in search for motion. Moved councillor Clark, seconded councillor Dryly. Councillor Clark. Councillor Dryly.
No, thanks.
Any other councillor? No, if not, I'm going to put it. Those in favour? No one against? I declare that carried unanimous. Okay. So item 8.5. H1 2024-25 Council Plan and Annual Plan Progress Reports, Director of Performance and Transformation. To introduce this one, councillor Hood.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the fairly extensive report before us details progress on the 24-25 Council Plan, which has 116 actions, and as at December, 50 have been completed, 58 are on track, 4 are progressing with some delay, 3 have been cancelled and 1 has not yet commenced. So those statistics, I think, speak for themselves. It's an important part of the council's accountability to the public and to transparently report how we are tracking against the council plan, and that's what this report seeks to do.
Thank you, councillor Hood. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Dryly.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, it seems to be actually a really good report that we've got 50 completed and 58 are on track and a very small number that are delayed and cancelled. So I guess I would ask our CEO to reflect on that success and to congratulate the staff and everyone involved for getting through what many have referred to as a large and complex plan in the last 4 years. And part of my question is around what happens to perhaps the items that aren't completed or that's in terms of the next plan, and what given what we've worked through, what are your reflections on how we should be looking at our plan in a new or different way in the coming couple of months?
Thanks, councillor. And I firstly appreciate the comments, councillors there. Absolutely, the data in front of us shows that we've delivered on really a significant amount of actions within the council plan. And I couldn't be prouder of the organisation that's worked incredibly hard with councillors and community to develop them. Hasn't always gone exactly to plan, and we've obviously there's things that have been easier and harder, but overall we've been able to put together so many new projects, strategies, plans, and we've done that off the back of arguably one of the toughest times in terms of the first couple of years of this council plan was done in a pandemic. And we got used to whole new ways of working. We've had significant changes to council term, councillors over that time. So thank you for those comments, and I certainly will pass them on to the staff because we couldn't be more proud of what we have been able to deliver under very tough circumstances. Second part to your question was around what happens with the unfinished ones. In a usual sense, we would get to the 30th of June and the projects would be carried forward. What we will do come the end of this council plan and into the new council plan is we'll consider whether they are still right for us as Hepburn Shire going forward. And I think also important to note, we do that anyway. So, and even with the projects, say this year's budget, if we come into 6 months down to the track and something's changed and we just went through that process, councillors undertook to do that rate cap around the waste services based on the best information at the time. Things have changed. We've been able to pivot and we'll continue to do that with projects. Of course, there's been delays for a whole range of reasons, particularly been difficult to attract and retain quality staff. We certainly are trying to make it an improved workforce for here. That's really helping, and I think we've seen some significant turnaround in some of our areas where we were lacking staff and not able to deliver the customer service that we want to. So my reflection going forward is we've got a fantastic group of individuals that have delivered high quality services and will continue to into the future. Obviously, council is in a very tough financial position, and the sector is. Councils, Hepburn Shire's financial position is arguably better than some councils, but this council's decided to tackle that head on, and I commend you for that. And so we are facing challenges over the next period of the next council plan being realistic to our financial and human resources. And you can see that we need to have significant cuts. But what I hope the community and what I hope councillors can see is we've got a track record of delivering. So wherever we settle post the council plan on what services we're delivering, what projects that we're delivering, we've got a fantastic track record of delivering, and I think that'll continue.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillor?
Statement.
A statement, councillor Cornish?
I think our CEO needs to be commended. It's brilliant. And honestly, I don't think any CEO would get to this point without knowing this Shire back to front. Every detail and working very hard with his staff. So very impressed.
Thank you, councillor Cornish. Any other councillors? No, all right. No further questions. I'll put the officer's recommendation. Council notes the council plan 2021-25 and the annual plan 2023-24 progress reports for the first half of 2024-25. 2 notes, this report will be published on the councillor's website. Search for motion, councillors.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hood, do we have a seconder? Councillor Cornish. Councillor Hood,
Just briefly, Mayor, look, we're simply noting this progress report. That's quite straightforward. I concur with the sentiments of my colleagues that the report itself is very clear. It's a very good, transparent report. And I certainly also support the notion that there's been quite some impressive progress across a very large number of initiatives. However, having said that, I'm confident we are now quite mindful that going forward, largely out of financial necessity, our plans going forward cannot be as expansive and can't be as expensive, because these have come at quite a cost in terms of the deficits that we've incurred in recent years. And that in itself is telling us that we need to realign those plans and strategies into something more realistic and achievable, with in particular a focus on core business and increasing customer satisfaction in the core business areas.
thank you. No one else wants? Right, not, I'm going to put that. Those in favour? Those against? One against, so I declare that carried unanimously. Whether it's unanimous, I won't call out those names. 8.6 is the awarding of tender RTF 2024.178 Hepburn Bathhouse Decking and Drainage Project. This one, questions be directed to the Director of Infrastructure and Delivery, and Councillor Hockey to introduce this one.
Yes, so the Hepburn Bathhouse is in the lowest point of the Mineral Springs Reserve, of course, and has experienced flooding in recent years from multiple sides. This project scope, therefore, was developed to address drainage and flood management of the southern side to ensure preservation of the heritage-listed building and the long-term operational sustainability for the current tenant. Designs and approvals are complete and procurement for the works has been undertaken.
Any questions, councillors? No questions? No questions. I'm looking for a motion.
I'm happy to move it.
Councillor Hockey, with seconder. Don't have a seconder yet. Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Hockey.
No, I've nothing to add.
Hewitt.
Just to recommend the officers, support the officer's recommendation, knowing that this is part of the ongoing upgrading and updating of an bathhouse, and that perhaps to comment positively on the apparently detailed tender amounts that have been included in it, and acknowledge that as part of the lease agreements with Belgrave. So I think that would support it.
If any other councillor wishes. Not, I'm going to put that. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Good. Okay, so 8.7, variation and extension of contract RFQ 2023.205- Green Waste Processing, Director of Infrastructure and Delivery. Now, Councillor Clark to introduce this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Fellow councillors, just to introduce this subject, this relates to a contract between Hepburn Shire Council and Green Care Mulching Proprietary Limited. It relates to the processing and transport of green waste, and the volumes have been found to be significantly higher than anticipated. over the last period of time. This requires, to address this, it requires an increase in contract value to the tune of 180,000. And the officers are also seeking an extension, the ability to extend the contract from December 2025 to December 2026.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor,
Yes, to Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas, I would have intuitively thought that the green waste delivered to the transfer stations would have declined rather than increased because of our introduction of the FOGO since last April. That obviously hasn't been the case. Do we know why? Or do we have any, perhaps we don't know why, but do we have any ideas about why that might have occurred?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question through the chair. We don't have any data to demonstrate why or evidence to suggest why areas might be. Like you, officers expected that the FOGO service would reduce or at least stabilise the green waste coming in. We do have a free green waste service for the full month of November, and that is when probably more than 50% of our annual intake is received. And I can only assume at this stage that we have a greater take-up of people using that service, or probably at large volumes of garden clean-up in a concentrated period of time, which might be too much to go into the FOGO service bin potentially. So at the moment, we're just speculating and we're yet to determine exactly why.
any other questions, councillors? Councillor Hood.
Similar question to Mr. Lucas, if I may, and I fully appreciate that we may not yet understand why it's increased, but I'm wondering, can you give us an indication of by how much has the volumes increased? What sort of percentage increase are we looking at here beyond what you expected?
So through the chair, we were anticipating about 5,000 cubic metres of green waste per annum across the 3 sites. And what the officers are seeking tonight is approval to fund up to 8,000 cubic metres across the 3 sites. So it is substantial. There'll be a safety margin in that with estimates, but it's nonetheless a reasonable increase in volume.
Thank you. Well, a 60% increase or thereabouts is not only an increase, but it's a very substantial increase, which would suggest there must be some changed behaviour somewhere.
And if I can, through the chair, the green waste was originally put in place to support property owners cleaning up their properties for fire prevention purposes. Potentially, that service is now being utilised in a different way, which is for fire cleanup, but perhaps also for routine garden management as well.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lucas. I'm just thinking, Mayor, Mr. Lucas, in terms of we are seeing some increased volumes, and I appreciate there have been some initiatives that we're now that are becoming more familiar in the community and we start to understand they're doing. What is the review process, or how are you strategically reviewing how this works, particularly in association with our total waste management program, noting that you're looking for an extension for 12 months?
Thank you, Councillor Clark, and through the chair. Council just previously considered an item around deferring the rate variation for waste services. And Council is also scheduled to undertake a review of the FOGO service, success of that service at the 12-month anniversary. So come 8th of April, we will be 12 months into that service and we experienced 4 seasons. So we'll start to do a bit of a deeper dive into the FOGO service and its successes or shortcomings, and we'll provide that back to Council. But as part of our ongoing requirement to find efficiencies and cost savings, we'll look to review a lot of or all of the waste services, including the free green waste for the month of November and the operation of our transfer stations and our hard waste collection and our tip pass arrangements. All those services will be under review, starting with the FOGO service in a couple of months' time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councillors wish to? So, just a question from me, Mr. Lucas. With the Clunes hard rubbish collection, does any of the branches and so on, is it an allocation there for green waste to be put out on the waste? Does any of that add to that, or does that go separately?
Through the chair, the hard waste collection service provided in the Clunes area is hard waste, not green waste. It's a separate matter.
You are allowed to put sticks if they're tied together, Mr. Lucas. Okay. But, so that doesn't add, that goes separately. Perhaps I might just make an observation, perhaps our compliance has been really busy in getting people to clean up their blocks, which might have some effect on it as well. So there might be a positive here at people actually getting the message to clean their blocks up. 52 high fire prone areas in the state. So there could be an upside here, even though it costs money. All right, councillors, no further. Yeah, Councillor Dryly, sorry.
Through you, Mayor. Mr. Lucas, given that we're in looking for resource recovery opportunities and financial recovery opportunities, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity down the track or in the near future for us to reconsider how we treat our green waste as a resource rather than a cost.
Through the chair. Yes, there is. So this contract extension allows us or provides opportunity to treat the green waste for a further 12-month period. We are also in the midst of a project to look at our composting arrangement for the FOGO service. I think as part of the FOGO service review in April that I referenced earlier, and the need for us to look at managing green waste fully, there is an opportunity to look at that as a value add scenario. At the moment, we offer it for free to community for those that might want that material, but the take up from community is very low. So the question obviously comes around how do we improve that product and make better use of it as a resource?
Any other councillor wish to ask questions? All right, if there's no further questions, we a motion that we vary the contract $180,000, including GST per annum. There is a 1-year extension of this contract. Processing, cartage and disposal of green waste at Hepburn Shire's transfer stations between Hepburn Shire Council and Green Care Mulching Proprietary Limited, commencing on the 22nd of December 2025. Further authorises council officers to make variations to the contract within approved officer delegations within approved budget, and authorises Chief Executive Officer to sign the contract. So I'm in search of motion. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Seconded. Councillor Dryly. Councillor Clark.
No, only to implement some of the previous work done by the previous council in this waste space, and we're all very much looking forward to seeing how we can grow and continue to improve the service.
Councillor Dryly.
Only to say, look, it is a concern that we are seeing cost increases yet again in our services, but it seems to be the nature of our system at the moment, and to continue to, obviously through review processes, to look at how we can better project what those costs or resource recovery opportunities might be.
Any other councillor? No, I'm going to put it then. Those in favour? Unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay. Contract RFT 2004.E3, reconstruction of Dean Newland Road, Newland. Director of Infrastructure and Delivery, and introduced by Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Mayor. And to be brief, this report is for us councillors to consider awarding a contract for the pavement reconstruction of approximately 1.9 kilometres of Dean Newland Road in Newland.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Mayor. Officers, my interpretation of this report is that the roadworks that we were planning preparing to undertake at Chanters Lane in conjunction with Macedon Ranges Shire Council, as it's literally on our border. Given that that work has been of necessity deferred through factors out of our control, that the funds have now been directed to this particular road, the Dean Newland Road. Would I be correct then in assuming that this was the next highest ranked, most urgent road work that needed to be done? That's what's eventuated out of this transfer of funds.
Through the chair, simple answer is yes, it is. This section was scheduled next financial year, and in preparation for when doing the design work for stage one, we actually did further design work to have future projects shovel ready. So it makes sense now to bring this project forward. The necessity that you reference in terms of Chanters Lane is a boundary road, and the section that is being up for rehabilitation is managed by Macedon Ranges. Therefore, they are ultimately responsible for delivering capital works. But we as a joint owner have responsibility to contribute 50% of the capital investment. Project there was intended to be funded through the Local Roads Community Infrastructure Program. That grant funding must be acquitted by June 30 of this year. And because of the design delays and the planning permit relating to vegetation removal, vegetation impact, that has triggered a cultural heritage assessment. That project is not deferred, but it's actually delayed. So that work is still planning, it's still happening, but it's not going to be delivered by June 30. So to avoid handing grant funding back, we're redirecting, then we'll fund Chanters Lane next year once those planning matters have been resolved and the project can proceed.
Any further questions, councillors? Okay, I think it's important that we get this one right. The recommendation is that we award stages 1 and 2 of the contract for a fixed lump sum of $809,066.44. Not 45 cents. So I thought it might be to On-Track Civil Earthworks. Delegates an additional $90,933.56, excluding PST to the above lump sum to the project superintendent, management of any unforeseen variations over the life of the contract. Delegates the authority to the Chief Executive Officer to sign the contract documents on behalf of Council. Resolves the tender evaluation report remains confidential, and confirms a commitment to the Chanters Lane Fernhill project and allocation of funding for Roads to Recovery program in 2025-26. Promotion, councillors. Move Councillor Hood.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
The seconder. Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Hood.
Yeah, two comments, Mayor. In response to Mr. Lucas' advice, I'm reassured that, and as the public ought to be, that we have a process whereby the roadworks are prioritised and ranked, and that we have a strong basis and criteria for ranking the jobs. So to transfer to this one, eminently sensible. Second point I'd make, particularly for my colleagues out in the western part of the Shire, is don't be confused by the name Chanters Lane. It's a main road that goes between Trentham and Wood End and the Calder Highway. It's heavily trafficked, and point number 5 in this motion to reconfirm our commitment to doing that work in next financial year is terribly important in my view. Heavy traffic flow, and I can assure you that section of road is in terrible condition. Be one of the worst in the Shire, I would confidently say. And I'm glad that it's being worked on with us and Macedon Ranges, but I support the officer's recommendation.
Just to say, very pleased that we've got an alternative at stage to not have to hand back Road to Recovery money. So that's a good outcome. and to acknowledge that any money that we spent on roads in the Hepburn Shire is important and well spent. So happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Any other councillor? No other councillors are going to put it? Those in favour? Those against? I declare that carried unanimously. You have it, councillors. 8.9, recommendations from the Audit and Risk Committee. Meeting held on the 9th of December 2024, and the appointment of a chair. Performance and transformation after this, and introduced by Councillor Tony Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, my first meeting that I attended was on the 9th of December. It was not any significant discussion points made other than appointing the chair, Mr. Shane Marr, which occurred.
Thank you. Councillors, questions?
Sorry, excuse me. Is Mr. in the thing it says Mr. Marr's attending?
No.
He's not. Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, perhaps it's not so much a question, a suggestion that, and I'm literally looking at the recommendation where we, as councillors, are taking on board the Audit and Risk Committee's recommendations. Going forward, I would like to see the recommendations very clearly spelt out, dot point form or whatever, that clearly are recommendations. That we have 4 independent members on that committee that are extremely well qualified and experienced, and they should be, as a committee, making recommendations to us. As it stands in this particular report, the only recommendation is that they're recommending who the chair of the committee would be, and I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But I would literally like to see it much more clearly as to who is advising the council.
Councillor Clark.
So yeah, look, a bit of a question to the officer, comment and questions to the officers. The Risk and Audit Committee, I think, is a very important committee, and we have some significant challenges moving ahead. And I think it needs to be, just echoing Councillor Hood's comments, I think we need to ensure that take advantage of the skills and expertise we have in that committee to get some meaningful advice from that committee. That's my comment. But the question is, from the officer's perspective, what are the key risks items that will be reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee?
I might take that one. So happy to take on the comment around the minutes. I think it's important to note, and obviously there's a number of confidential items. So read the minutes in conjunction with the chair's report, as we've been on the belief that it's a pretty good understanding of the outcomes, and particularly because there's 2 councillors on the committee, it's really a role for the councillors to provide the feedback from all committees, but particularly the audit and risk to your fellow councillors. But we'll take time to see if there's something that we can do in regards to the motions, which is effectively what councillors are noting as part of the recommendations. The key risk, and there's a number of risks. We do have a strategic risk register. It's effectively ensuring the implementation of the financial vision. That's the number one risk that the Audit and Risk Committee will be, I suppose, looking at over the next 6 to 12 months. We talk about that around deciding the reduction to services and where those cost savings come from, or additional revenue sources. But it's important to note that all of those changes then come with risks of implementation. So they'll be particularly concerned with that, but not taking their eye off the general operations of council, the compliance and governance of council. We've got an internal audit function as well, but and particularly the financial statements and audit process. But I can particularly see that they are interested that now council made decisions around the financial vision, which if enacted significantly improves the financial position, they'll want to see that those decisions are enacted.
Any other questions, councillors? I'm looking for a motion then. Councillor Clark. Seconder. Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Clark.
You just short quick comment, I'm very much looking forward to working with the Audit Committee and as a council, we work very closely with the Audit Committee so that they can provide us advice to support our decision-making process.
Councillor Hewitt. Any other councillor? No. Put that then. All those in favour? Those against? Yeah, that carried unanimously. Okay, we go to 8.10, records of councillor attendance. This is introduced by councillor Cornish.
Oh, yes, Mayor. This is about the committees that we attend with our community, people that are on our committees, and also any recommendations that are brought forward to council consideration. Most of the minutes in this report are from the previous council term. Some of them are a little aged, as a council officer emailed me with that word, but apart from that, we do have minutes that I think the councillors that was distributed last week of this council term's committees, and I did read through those, and I will put forward a motion, but that's all I need to say right now.
Okay, just now. Right. Okay. Any questions, councillor? That's the Clark.
Yes, thank you. A question to the officers. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious in terms of practice, being on the Disability Advisory Committee. I did note that there were a number of minutes from some time ago last year, obviously not the current minutes. I would have thought the practice would have been that at the next council meeting, pending obviously a realistic timeline, and I thought 1 or 2 weeks, 2 weeks would be enough, that the minutes would be appearing to council. Is that standard practice?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Clark, through the chair. Yes, so this report is actually around the records of attendance of councillors at those sessions rather than the minutes.
Yep.
So the minutes are provided in a report to councillors via the bulletin each month. So they come up as they're completed. The records of attendance are only brought up at the end of each quarter because they don't include any of the recommendations from the committees. So we clean those up at each quarter. So that's where we're seeing the delay here, but the minutes do go up each month.
Okay. Thank you.
So just if I might, from the chair, just a further explanation. Sometimes, and I can tell you about the Reconciliation Advisory Committee, I got the minutes today in draft and they haven't yet been approved as the prerequisite meeting by the committee. So once that goes back to the committee and those minutes are approved, I can then raise them as part of my report to the committee.
Thank you.
A bit of a process there about getting draft minutes and then putting them up for the approved by the actual committee. In any event, so that's why it takes so long sometimes. So just that little bit of extra. Yes, that the councillors can bring them up in their reports. That's a good way of reporting what their activities are. All right. So, any other questions, councillors? No questions. So.
Make a statement.
So councillor, you want to move a motion, do you?
I just want to make a statement.
I've got it. Yeah. Before we get a motion.
Councillor Clark's point.
Yep. Okay.
I may say. The committees that I chair, we did have the members' approval of the minutes, and I would like to see that the minutes are distributed once the committee has approved them, because there are actions, and I've come across this problem very recently, there are actions that need a report possibly, and maybe a timeline. And I'd like to see them as soon as they're approved by the committee members, come to an ordinary council meeting. I'd like to see that. So otherwise it gets very messy and, anyway, there's no more to add on that.
Okay, so councillors, any more questions? If not, we've got a motion, and the motion is
Motion is dot point one.
that council receives and notes the records of council attendance as detailed in the report. And 2, acknowledges the minutes also circulated on 16th of December 2024 meeting of the LGBTIQA+ Advisory Committee, and requests officers to bring a report to council on the implications of accepting and implementing the advice and recommendations provided by the LGBTIQA+ Advisory Committee from that meeting. So that's the motion as it stands. Got a mover?
Point of order, Mayor. So this is an amendment to the original motion.
Yeah, it's not the officer's recommendation.
No. It's not the opposite. This is the motion.
Okay.
I'll move that. I'll move that. Yeah.
So, move councillor Cornish. Have we got a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded councillor Hood. Councillor Cornish.
I'll explain, Councillor Riley. As far as I'm concerned, it actually shouldn't have appeared there. It is an amendment, in my view. Am I correct? Amendment to the officer's recommendation.
Through you, Mayor, what needed to probably occur was asking for a motion. Obviously, you went to the motion that was available, that be councillor Cornish. So just some confusion in the process. So the officer's recommendations are printed, but councillors can move any motion. Councillor Cornish is moving this motion.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because the councillor moves motions.
That's all right.
So that would explain Councillor Riley's question.
Yep.
I'll just not briefly, I'll just explain the point 2 for clarity. The 16th of December meeting with the committee strongly recommended, I think it was dot point 6.2 in the minutes, that action at dot point 2, that we take that action to bring a report, ask for a report, that the council officers bring a report to council on implications of accepting and implementing the advice and recommendations provided by the advisory committee. Now, that recommendation is pertaining to a HIV, the HIV day. I'm getting confused now, sorry.
World AIDS Day, help.
World AIDS Day. I've written it. It's a vigil. Yes, thank you. That a vigil be undertaken on the 1st of December of every year. So we need a report to come from our officers to explain to council basically the financial or any other implications of doing that action. But it's very important to this committee. Now, keep in mind that World AIDS Day is the 1st of December. And it first came about in 1988. And it is usually a vigil around the world. So they're asking for some sort of vigil, but nothing specific as to where this point, but flag raising as well. But we'll get further details in a report. I hope it does get through because it's very important to them.
Yeah. Councillor Hood.
Yeah, in speaking for this, and this is a new topic on me, but it strikes me that this is an eminently sensible move by one of our advisory committees to, on the one hand, advise us to do something, but on the other hand, ask us, well, what are the implications and costs and whatever of actually doing it? And I think that's a very pragmatic approach that perhaps should be adopted by many of our advisory committees. It's one thing to recommend we do something, but it sounds like they've taken a realistic approach to say we'd like to do something, but tell us a bit more before we go ahead and do it. I think that's sensible move.
You can
Yes,
have clarification.
yeah,
At any time during the debate, you're allowed to have a point of clarification.
just a point of clarification, Councillor Cornish. I may be wrong. My recollection is that there are a number of commemorative days for the LGBTQI community, and previously the committee had decided on a set number. Is this an additional one or a change? And they had different ones every year. Is it? But you did mention they wanted to do this every year, so it became a permanent one. I'm not, but I presume perhaps that would be covered in the report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it's right. It will be covered in the report. This is something they wish to, vigil, to conduct every year on the 1st of December. There are set events. According to the Rainbow Action Plan, to page 6, the events are not just what we have at the moment. They can be expanded. So this falls in with their action plan as well, so, which was mentioned at the meeting. So yes, it's expanding exactly what the role of the committee is, and also inviting our community to a vigil to honour those that any of that community have lost.
Councillor Clark, you wish to speak or ask a point of clarification?
Just a comment to be, considered as a part of this process, this review process. The 3rd of December is International Day for People with Disability. And I think we just need to ensure, as we look at it, how new events impact positively, negatively with other existing events. That's fine, but that's just a comment.
Councillor Dryling.
Just a point of clarification, Mayor, maybe to governance around if this is the best way to be implementing this recommendation, or there may be better ways to do it, notwithstanding the very seemingly importance of the measure and issue that we're talking about.
So probably I'll take a couple of things. 2 things to clarify, I think, councillors and community. So the motion's absolutely fine and should be considered, and as the motion is, it'll provide a report which officers will then go away and write the pros, the cons, the financial implications, and bring that back. What I would say, and we'll take this on notice, I think there's been some confusion around councillors, the listing of councillors' attendances, which is effectively what this item was, and minutes. And so this report is around records of councillors' attendances. So what meetings do councillors go to doesn't actually go into the minutes. The minutes are provided to councillors on a weekly basis as they are finalised by advisory committees through your weekly councillor bulletin, and then can be enacted that way. So that's just to ensure the community that councillors are getting the advisory committee meeting minutes as they happen, are approved, and through that mechanism, this item is relating to, and that's why you had a different listing and time frame. The attendance, it takes into account which committees, and Councillor Cornish has taken the opportunity to add an item to that resolution. So that now needs to be considered, debated and voted upon.
So we understand that this is a bit messy, but nevertheless, we can sort it out in the future, but that doesn't detract from what the meaning of this motion is. So, all right. So you had enough debate on this, councillors. Anybody want to speak for or against it? If not, I'm going to put those in favour. Unanimous. Okay, now we move to notices of motion, if I'm not wrong. So notice of motion, and we have a notice of motion from Councillor Brian Hood and The motion is proposed that the council directs the CEO to write to the Honourable Jacqueline Symes MP, Treasurer of Victoria, the Honourable Nick Staker, Minister for Local Government, to express our objection to council being designated as the formal collection agency for the state imposed tax. 2, directs the CEO to prepare a motion for the MAV State Council meeting be submitted to the MAV no later than the 17th of March 2025. Local government being designated as the collection agency on behalf of state government. Councillor, is your motion?
That's the motion that I'm proposing in those two parts. Yeah. Councillors, we would be aware that the state government has proposed this change whereby councils across Victoria would levy the emergency services volunteer charge. Opposed to that move because of the consequences that would flow from it. First of all, it's passing another task to council, no cost. No, we don't get no admin fee for it. And yet we would have to bill and collect that at our own cost and possibly also with IT system changes. Second consequence would be we would have to provide customer service role, answering information queries from the public about this charge, which has nothing at all to do with councils. It's a state government charge.
So,
and thirdly,
Councillor Wood, are you introducing this motion or moving it? You're speaking to it.
I'm speaking to you. You introduced it, Mayor. I'm speaking to it.
I just was giving you opportunity to preamble if you wanted, but if you're happy to move it and speak to it, that's really good.
Oh, yeah, no, I thought you sought my indication that I was on moving it as it's written in the papers. The third consequence, councillors, is the perception amongst the public that it'll appear on the rates notice. It will reflect on council, even though it's not intended to. People may not look carefully to see that this is a state imposed charge, nothing to do with council. As we've heard earlier, a lot of our residents and ratepayers are struggling to pay their rates on time. A lot of people are struggling under cost of living pressures, but this is another tax collector role being imposed on councils. I'm suggesting a two-step process, as you said, Mayor, that we write to the Treasurer and the Minister expressing our objection to this idea. And secondly, that we, through the MAV process, seek their support to signal our opposition to it as well. So, councillors, I would ask for your support on that motion.
Got a seconder?
Seconded.
Seconded, Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Hewitt.
Yes, I certainly support Councillor Wood's motion on this. Council does support all of our emergency services in their efforts to keep our emergencies safe. The replacement of the fire service levy and emergency services volunteer fund significantly increases the value of that tax, and it's problematic. Generally, in terms of doing it, cost of living crisis and the anticipated increases, particularly been estimated at over 130% for our farming community. It is, as Councillor Hood's indicated, problematic for local councils to be designated to be the collection agency via our annual rates notices, because it does create an administrative burden, perception that it's our tax and our increase, and that is probably also would be a perception that we retain that money when indeed it must be passed on to the state government. I would support Councillor Hood's motion in that collection of the tax needs to be managed by the state government rather than passing the responsibility onto local government.
Anyone else? No one else? What? Yeah.
I'd like to just get clarification. So this is completely new tax that the form that was previously collected, it wasn't by local government. It was.
Fire services levy was. This is an expansion of that to the emergency services levy. But the problems that we've had with the fire service, sorry, Councillor. I should have let you answer this.
You're doing it fine, councillor.
Be exacerbated by the increase.
Okay, so any other council wish to speak? What else wish to speak? I'll put it, those in favour? Those against? Declared. All right, councillor Hood, let's get this round the right way. I'll give you a chance to move your motion and you can have a preamble if you want.
Thank you, Mayor.
Points round.
Councillors, this notice of motion is to address
9.2, sorry. 9.2,
changes to the electoral roll.
got a page. Oh. Yeah, well, yeah. Here we go. 9.2. Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'm seeking a similar process here whereby we write to the Minister for Local Government and also secondly, use the MAV process to advocate on our behalf. Councillors, there were state government imposed changes to the electoral roll late last year, just ahead of the election. The unfortunate consequences out of that, unintended consequences, is that while a lot of non-resident ratepayers were removed from the electoral roll, which they had always been on, they, in many cases, did not receive appropriate communication from the state government indicating the process under which they could get reinstated back onto the roll. Now, that goes to the very heart of democracy. This is literally our ratepayers not being able to exercise a vote, their democratic right, at the most recent election. That's how important it is. It's also significant that it shrunk Hepburn Shire's electoral roll from 13,000 to 10,000 people. So it was a massive change. And I know through a lot of phone calls and contact and through the activities that I've undertook over the last two elections that in what used to be the old Colaban ward, there were 500 ratepayers in that category. I understand there was more than double that number in Birchwood, in what used to be Birchwood. So a lot of our people inadvertently through what can only be described as deficient communication from the state government found themselves off the electoral roll. Now, I don't think that's good enough. Every ratepayer has a right to vote and be on the roll. And this error needs to be rectified by a changed process through the state government, and perhaps it's through reinstating those people directly back onto the roll, or at the very least informing them how they can get back onto it. I'm mindful, councillors, that Chief Executive Mr Thomas has already written to the Electoral Commission, received quite an unsatisfactory response in that was handballed back to saying that it's not his issue, it's a state government issue. Well, I think we should follow up with the state government and make sure that these ratepayers are at least given the opportunity to exercise their democratic right.
Motion now.
Yes, I'll move the motion as it's written in the papers that that the CEO writes to the Minister for Local Government seeking an amendment to the Act to reinstate those ratepayers onto the electoral roll. And secondly, that we prepare a motion for the MAV State Council, the 17th of March date for submission being significant in that it's ahead of the next MAV meeting, asking for the same thing and seeking the MAV support to advocate for that change. And it's quite a dramatic impact that it's had on our ratepayers.
Seconder.
I'll second it.
Seconded councillor Hewitt. Councillor Hood.
I think I've said enough on that subject, Mayor.
Okay. Preamble covered it. Right, councillor Hewitt.
Just to seek my fellow councillors' support for this, particularly point, as councillor has already indicated, the CEO has already written to the BEC with a copy to the local government minister. But point two, bringing it to the MAB is also an important consideration. Councillors, you'll be aware that a couple of other shires have been affected even worse than us. That's Mornington Shire has had a similar decrease in the voter roll, with some implications for the makeup of that council. And Surf Coast is the other one I'm aware of through discussions. So it is an issue that requires review in the interests of equity and enabling those who contribute to the financial viability of the Shire to have some say in what happens here.
Any other councillor?
Yeah, I'll just have a little word about it. So I haven't seen any public commentary about this issue at all. I haven't received any commentary from anyone. I can't quantify or I don't have any insights into the extent to which the communication failed. So I can only guess about that. So I'm not sure about that. The general idea that buying a property buys you a vote ruffles my feathers, so to speak. But I'm also aware that there's a large cohort who are either on the electoral roll or should be on the electoral roll who are not voting, and we're not concerning ourselves with them. So that's a large number of people who, perhaps for literacy reasons or a sense of pointlessness, are not voting, and we're not bringing a motion about why they're not voting at all. So that's just my view.
Councillor Dodd, and then Councillor Clark.
Yeah, look, I would empathise with Councillor Hockey's points of view too, and to expand on the inequities of this past election in terms of the disadvantage that crept in for a number of people around the confusion of how people should vote, and the literacy issues around having to do a postal vote. I think there are some broader issues around the process that I believe that does need review and perhaps is being reviewed. And it's and I too have some ruffled feathers around the right to vote, given your property ownership. I think that there's to be engaged in your local community and building resilience. Having that vote is important, but I, acknowledge Councillor Hood's concerns, and but I'm not sure that I can support this one.
Okay, any other councillor? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I'd like to speak against the motion. While I acknowledge the democratic right and I can see some of the process, I principally am against the motion through conflict of interest. We, as individuals, I believe we absolutely have the right and responsibility to talk about should we choose to do that. As a council, however, I believe for us writing to the minister, advocating about a process for which we as individual councillors can benefit, I think is inappropriate in my view, and do not believe we should be doing it. I also believe that people will make individual choices where they chose to read the information, whether they chose to ignore it. They may not have received it, however that works, but I just do not believe it's the council's place in this instance to talk about a process that we as councillors or elected councillors will directly benefit. I think it's inappropriate.
Cornish.
Unfortunately, I can't support it. I'd like to, I really would, because I think councillor would always comes with votes. But why I'm not supporting it is that these people may have chosen not to vote. Now, it's a choice, that's democracy. Now, I have been told, I've done a bit of homework, that people were adequately notified about the changes. If they weren't, that's a different situation. But then I think that if every ratepayer, every person in Hepburn and right throughout the country were given a choice as to whether they vote or not, you might find it's even a more devastating result. So this is about a choice. And I'm going to give the ratepayers that did not vote benefit of a doubt that they chose not to vote. Majority chosen. That's why it's just too unknown for me to go.
What we've done. Councillor Hood.
Yes, I will exercise my right to reply, Mayor. Thank you. Because unfortunately, it would seem in this debate that a number of different, in some cases completely unrelated topics have conflated. This is simply responding to those who taken off the roll, did not want to be taken off it, and were not told by the state government what the process was to get reinstated back on. So they didn't even get a chance to vote. I've heard comments about how to vote. This has got nothing at all to do with how to vote. And it's got nothing at all to do with choice. These people did not have a choice. Many of them called me saying, initially asking, where are the voting papers? How do I get them? We haven't got them yet. Should have got them by now. Only to then to be found when they spoke to the VEC that they'd been taken off the roll and it was too late to get back on. So this has got nothing at all to do with choice, nothing at all to do with how to vote, and absolutely nothing at all to do with conflict of interest. This goes to the very heart of us representing our constituents, representing their interest, that they get onto and stay on to the electoral roll. And for goodness sake, okay, they own properties, they're a ratepayer. That's not a sin. This is fundamental democracy, and a number of completely unrelated topics have diverted this debate. Thank you, Mayor.
But everybody's had their say, so I'm going to put it. Those in favour? That's Councillor Wood, Councillor Hewitt. Those against? Councillor Clark, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hockey, Councillor Dryly, Councillor Henderson.
Call a division.
Yes, division. Those in favour?
Sorry, can you, to point of order, can you explain context?
Well, when you call a division, you actually call out, and it's in the, and it is in the minutes anyway, but it's put in the minutes who voted for and who voted against. So those in favour? Councillor Hood, Councillor Dryly.
Sorry.
Councillor Hood and Councillor Hewitt. I was going to say change of mind. You're allowed to do that too.
That's what you do.
Those against?
You can't do that in a division.
Councillor Clark, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hockey, and Councillor Riley, and myself.
Point of order, Mayor. Sorry, I was thrown by the tone of Councillor Hood's objection. I think that it's inappropriate for a voice to be raised in that way.
What section of the governance rules is that under?
Intimidating in the way that he was expressing himself.
I'm happy to. I don't think it's a point of order there. I'm going to move on. Just an explanation as to why I was actually one of those people, and I actually got notified, voted in another election. So I had my chance and I took it. But anyway, we'll move on.
In my defence, Mayor, I will state that all I did was call a division.
That's right.
I completely reject any notion that I spoke inappropriately. That's absolute nonsense.
That's right. We'll move on now, Councillor Hood. Right, now we've got a notice of motion, Councillor Hood. I'll allow you a short preamble before you finish your motion, Councillor Hood.
Councillors, the spirit and intention of this motion is to aid residents in our shire on extreme weather days by giving them access to council facilities such as our community centres and libraries. We know for a fact that we have a disproportionately high section of our community of a greater age. We have people with disability, we have people that are economically disadvantaged. It would make eminent sense, I think, to make available to them access to some very, very good facilities that council has on extreme weather days. And it would be a shame to not make those facilities available when they are most needed. That is the spirit and intention of this motion.
You can produce your motion. I think we can allow some question on any intent. So, councillor, if you have any questions before the motion about this? Anyone got any questions? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, and please bear with me because I might be procedure, it might be inaccurate here. I agree with your intent in terms of the motion. There's maybe a couple of things I want to change. For example, like it says council facilities, maybe appropriate council facilities, such as, and remove the word adoption, which I interpret as potentially compelling council to adopt a report that comes in. Just remove that word for consideration, which I think is the intent.
So, councillor, what you have a right to do once the motion's moved, you could amend that.
Okay, fine. Otherwise, so thank you for the clarification.
So that's fine. Nothing out of order there for asking us.
I'm a newbie, right?
Any other councillors wish to ask a question about it, without debating it? Question? Yes, councillor.
Question or statement or friends? Can I speak? Yeah.
Pardon?
Can I speak now?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're asking a question.
I'm not asking.
No, we'll wait for the debate. Councillor Riley.
Oh, just the point of governance around motion itself and how it fits with current procedures and reviews that might be in place, whether there's what framework, other frameworks are currently in motion that could make this motion unnecessary or could be rephrased.
I might take that. I think there's two parts to that, and I think they're quite different. The first part you referred to is there other processes going on that means that this motion's not required, and I interpret that, councillor, let me know if that's wrong, that we're doing something else, that this is already occurring.
Yep.
We're not aware of any such review or any piece of work, so without that motion, this piece of work would not necessarily, it's not underway at the moment. The second part, which I think you're referring to, is could the motion be written differently to achieve the intent of Councillor Hood's intent? Absolutely. That's not for me or officers. It's Councillor Hood who's put the notice of motion. That would now be for that to be accepted, and councillors, if they were of a mind to, request amendments to that motion. But absolutely, could councillors request and ultimately vote on different wording if that was sort of a way to achieve the similar intent?
Right, so we've heard the question. Councillor Hood, you want to put your motion now?
Yes, and in doing so, Mayor, I am genuinely open-minded to some wording changes to the motion. I understand that we have to deal with the motion as it is presented and it's in front of us now. But I will emphasise that the intent is that the motion is written in the positive, in that I am asking officers to tell us what is possible, how it will work. So that's not preempting any outcome. Officers may come back and give a different view. I'm asking for positive so that it can be considered. Obviously, it would only be adopted if the councillors decided to and after careful consideration. So again, it's not meant to be preempting that we would automatically adopt something that's put in front of us. I would never suggest that. So I'm asking that.
So you've moved your motion.
Motion is that officers prepare a set of procedures whereby council-owned facilities, we may expand on that, such as community centres and libraries, would be accessible to community members for the purpose of respite on extreme weather days. And I'm asking that that draft be tabled for consideration no later than the October 2025 council meeting.
As it's put here, that's your motion.
Yes.
Do I have a second for that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. Actually.
So councillor Hockey,
Yeah, I think we have to have provision for some extreme weather going.
councillor Hood, you can now debate it. Now.
Thank you, Mayor.
Motion.
And again, I re-emphasise that what the intent of this is. It's in the positive, in that I'm asking for something to come back to tell us what would be possible. It's not meant to be preemptive. I haven't defined what an extreme weather day would be. I'm happy to be guided by officers on that. I've used the example of community centres and libraries, but I would be open-minded to any other community facilities that we may have some influence or control over, so that we could offer people in need on extreme weather days, and we all know that they're happening with more frequency and more severity, looking for something to be in place in a sensible, organised fashion for next summer that we could consider in or around October.
Thank you. Councillor Ewan. Councillor Hockey, sorry.
Well, yeah, well, I was just saying, I think we do have to have the extreme days. I was post in December 2019, and it was the southwest coast. It was 45 degrees. It was surreal. So we've had days of quite benign summers, but it does feel like it turned hot and dry summers again. You have to allow for that possibility. 45 degrees in Trent.
Okay, councillors, any other councillors? Now, this is your time. Councillors, if you want to, you may want to discuss this further. If so, I'd need a motion to suspend standing orders while we had a discussion about it, or what somebody would like wish to move an amendment. Councillor.
Move an amendment.
Yep, so councillor Clark wants to move an amendment.
I support the motion in its intent. Absolutely, I think it's an important one. I'd like to suggest adding the term appropriate to appropriate facilities, and also just remove the word adoption.
Order, Meg, would we be able to have it? Oh, thanks on the screen. Yep.
That's on the screen now.
There's an amendment.
That makes sense.
Got to get a second. That makes sense. If everybody's read it, do I have an amendment? Do I have a second for that amendment?
Point of order, can we just check we're in correct governance at the moment? Is that, yeah, that's
right.
So an amendment has been put. If the mover and seconder are comfortable to accept that amendment, it becomes part of the motion on the table. If they are not, then we would seek a seconder and vote on the amendment by itself.
They have to accept it.
They don't.
They don't have to accept it. It can just be an amendment moved. So it's been an amendment moved.
You accept it?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I accept both of those amendments put forward by Councillor Clark.
You accept that?
Yes.
Okay, then the amendment becomes now the motion. Now to debate. Writing the motion.
Should this,
You can have a further amendment if you want to.
yes, I would like a further amendment if you'd be prepared to consider it, the movement seconder. The council directs the CEO to prepare a set of procedures whereby appropriate community-owned facilities, where appropriate council-owned facilities or other community venues, and then delete such as community centres and libraries, because my concern is in being prescriptive to council-owned facilities, it precludes the possibility of arrangements with other non-council facilities and organisations, which may be more appropriate in particular locations.
Mayor, I'm very willing to accept that sensible amendment.
Councillor Hockey?
Yes.
Yes, so got a further amendment. Can we get that up on the board, please?
It's up there now.
It's up there.
Oh, this is democracy at work. Yes.
I'd like to move a separate amendment.
But you can keep moving them until midnight if we want to.
Yeah, well, it's messy.
So
I think that set of procedures is overly prescriptive. I think that it should be
you're moving an amendment.
moving amendment, something along the lines that the council directs the CEO to prepare a report whereby appropriate on to explore how appropriate owned facilities or other community venues might be accessible to community members for the purpose of respite on extreme weather days. And that the report be tabled for consideration no later than October 2025.
A seconder for that. We have a seconder for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Riley's.
Almost.
Okay, we haven't got a seconder for that amendment.
But you could ask councillor Wood and councillor Hockey if they accept it.
Well, councillor Hood, do you accept that?
Is what's on the screen exactly what councillor Riley is proposing?
Yes.
Councillor Hockey?
Yes, I'm willing to support that. I don't mind. I emphasised before what the intent of this was. To call it a report rather than a set of procedures, I'm not hung up on that at all. That is fine. It's a report to explore how those appropriate facilities would be accessible and so on. That's fine.
Right, councillor Hockey?
Yes.
Accept that? All right.
Hold on, I want to speak. Come on.
This is your
Moment. Please, just a moment.
through Mayor, before you do, it might be appropriate to read the motion out
So-
as it exists,
So
particularly
before we
the
speak-
clerk.
For everyone's benefit, council directs the CEO to prepare a report to explore how appropriate council-owned facilities or other community venues would be accessible to community members for the purpose of respite on extreme weather days. The report be tabled for consideration no later than October 25 council meeting. That's what we've got before. Now, councillor Cornish, you've indicated you want to speak.
I can't support that, and I'll say why. I think the intent is great, but the reason is that it sits on its own as an action. It doesn't sit within any policy. The report's not asking for it to sit as a strategy. And it's not asking for it to be fitted anywhere. It's just asking an isolated action, report on an isolated action. And to me, that just sits nowhere. So
All right. Any other councillor there? Councillors can speak. Spoken to you. Yeah.
Look, I think in terms of emotion, I think that it's a really important issue for community, and we've had an incredibly hot summer, but we also have incredibly cold conditions in our shire as well. So it's and people are quite vulnerable to extremes of weather, and the injury rates for people are quite significant in extreme weather conditions, and we have quite poor housing in this shire across the state, really, when you look at the existing infrastructure. So I think measures like this could make it when they're considered and appropriately implemented, can make a considerable difference.
Right. Yeah, you can speak.
I thank you, councillor Farley. Councillor Cornish, I understand your concerns. I would expect that in preparing a report, council officers would relate that to the emergency, the different policies that already exist. It's probably also important that if the motion's approved or passed, that sorry, Mayor, through you. Sorry. Mayor, it's probably important that if this motion's approved, that officers also define what's a community member, because we've seen from the previous motion that non-resident ratepayers aren't considered community members. So it might be important that we actually define what constitutes a community member.
Well, it'll have to come out in the report. But can any other councillor wish to speak for this motion? If not, I'll give council, since people have spoken against, I'll give you right to reply, councillor. And you realise the councillor's reply, once that councillor reply finishes, we'll put it to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for massaging the intent of the motion into some better wording. The intent was always my emphasis. In response to some of the comments, look, this puts a task to officers. It's in response to extreme weather. To pick up on Councillor Dryley's good point, they may come back and say, well, what about extreme weather in winter when it's, way sub-zero and people are struggling? I think that's a good move. I would very much imagine that even though this is a response to extreme weather and things like that are happening, it must bear strong relationship to our emergency management policy. I can imagine it have a very strong links to our health and wellbeing policy. So I'm sure it can reside in several places within our policy structure. Yes, it's being introduced on its own, but out of necessity, and I am raising it in response to community requests. Leave it at that, Mayor.
Thank you. Now, going to put it. Right, those in favour? Councillor Clark, Councillor Hood, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hockey, Councillor Dryley, Councillor Hewitt. And against? Councillor Henderson.
We nearly got a unanimous one after all that.
Good. Okay, that is the notice. No items of business, I take it, councillors? Now we get to the councillor reports, councillor and CEO reports. So the mayor's report, you'll see it in the documents, councillors, and I intend to for people to take that as read. It was in the agenda. So my report as read. Thank you. Councillor Shirley Cornish.
Just take it as read. It's written there.
Thank you, Councillor Cornish. Councillor Tim Dryley.
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak to my report. I acknowledge that this month we are moving to a new system that have been tabled in advance. However, I'm still keen that I would like to talk about democracy briefly, which I do in my report, both globally and locally. And I'm sure that in my 3 minutes allocated still at this point, that both the law and democracy will prevail. Should I need to go over?
30 seconds.
If you get there, it is.
Sure. Councillor Dryley, please confine yourself to 3 minutes.
So, as we're all aware, I'm sure we have an encroachment and erosion of democratic principles we've seen on a national, international level with the United States and the rise of authoritarianism, and really quite a dire warning for democracy across the world, but also to consider how it fits locally, particularly around what we've seen the growing presence of racism and hate speech, the consolidation of wealth and power in the hands of billionaires, and the disregard for the well-being of ordinary people, particularly in the United States. But the importance of defending our own democratic structures. And really, I'm bringing it back to a local context because I know that that's important, and that we have a really important process ahead of us in our council plan, and the importance for community participation in that, and how local and democratic decision making is vital to that process. I'm concerned that for our community to have a fair and equitable opportunity to help shape a vision for our future, and to also consider and continues to embrace an inclusive and diverse range of voices and supports people of all abilities and vulnerabilities and creative expression. That also seeks to protect and enhance our natural environment and biodiverse ecosystems, and to, in the face of growing effects of unfolding climate change. The most important thing I want to highlight was the extension of our deliberative panel process, and to call out to people to get on and put an application in while it's still available. It's been extended till tomorrow evening, Wednesday, the 26th of February, and jump on the Hepburn Together webpage to register for that important democratic opportunity. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Right. Right, now we'll have Councillor Leslie Hewitt.
Thank you, Mayor. The report, we'll take it as read. It's in the agenda, but just want to highlight the progress of for your information, councillors and Mayor, the progress of the Daylesford Town Hall Project Advisory Committee. That will be going, the draft drawings will be going out for community consultation at the beginning of March for a period of time. And so I want to encourage everybody to have a look at that.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just read from mine as submitted. The highlight of January was the citizenship ceremony and community awards in Trentham on the 24th. It wasn't my first experience of such an event, but it was the first time I had a chance to reflect on the council's important role. Days later, I attended the Australia Day ceremony in Creswick in the morning, but I'd like to pay tribute here to the around 80 people from Clunes who got up super early, which must have been about 4:30 by my estimation, and made the trek up Mount Beckworth, and that's a Clunes tradition for over 2 decades. Big thank you to the Mayor and officers for assisting with organising council support for the event at the very last minute, including, I think, helping with the pancakes or the pancake supplies. Also, during January, I joined other councillors on a bus tour of Creswick and Clunes and surrounds, and that was a really valuable exercise. And February, the first part of February, saw me attend the Asset Committee meeting of the Creswick Museum, and I look forward to working with that hard-working team. And then from an invitation, I joined the Clunes Museum Committee for their monthly meeting, and noted a lot of passion and investment in their facility, and a terrific facility, actually. And just spent a large amount of money restoring a framed collection of photographs of many early citizens. It's something. I was delighted to travel up to Yandoit for a meeting of their community planning committee on the prior Sunday, and it was great to meet the crew and hear concerns in that part of the Shire. They expressed some concern of the loss of their own ward councillor, but I must say, travelling north from home, from Clunes straight to Yandoit, it felt very close to home. I attended a meeting of Clunes shopkeepers organised by Lana DeCourt, gained valuable insights into their present financial challenges that lots of soul searching about some innovative ideas to get with councillors Henderson, Cornish and Clark. I attended the listening post at the Creswick IGA and enjoyed many and varied chats with locals from across the Shire. And finally, I attended the meeting of the Mineral Springs Advisory Committee, and we looked at many projects and the several challenges on that front. Always more than happy to chat about any of these topics. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. My report can be taken as read, as tabled. The only 2 comments I'd make is experience through the last few weeks and months, just even though it wasn't necessary, reinforces to me the need for council to focus on the basics and do those things well, respond to community needs, and stick to our core functions. Second observation, I agree with the sentiments that have been expressed. I endorse them about democracy and the importance of it. And in so doing, I'll note that perhaps the best symbol of democracy that we've got is an electoral roll. I bet there's millions of people across the world that wish they had the opportunity to democratically be on an electoral roll. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark.
Just like to report back, particularly on the Disability Advisory Committee. Enjoyed my first meeting, very passionate. Council with them to provide tangible value back to council support decision making through reviewing, providing some recommendations around how to improve policies around accessibility and inclusion. Other than that, will I have an opportunity to will I have an opportunity to still submit a I'm not sure what we did with that. That
By
was
5 o'clock.
By 5 o'clock tomorrow, close of business. It should include things discussed in the way.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's not. It won't be reported. It'll be mainly the Disability Advisory Committee, and also just a personal thank you to all the officers for their proactive engagement and support around very documentation successful.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So now I'm looking for a motion to receive and note the mayor's and council reports. I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Cornish.
Second.
Councillor Clark, seconded. No need for that. All in favour? Hence, be carried unanimously.
Mr. Mayor,
Well, it's not 9 o'clock yet.
What's
No, well, it's 9 o'clock.
Fine for this item.
It's 9 o'clock? Yeah, 9 o'clock, yes. Okay,
Councillor.
Councillor Hood.
yeah, I move that we extend this ordinary council meeting beyond 9 o'clock until the remaining items on the agenda have been considered.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. So moved, seconded. Councillor Cornish. Those in favour?
So dull.
Against? Carried.
5-minute break, or we?
Suspend standing orders.
Well, if
No,
you want to move to suspend standing orders,
5-minute break.
order, don't we close the
we close very shortly to do the,
public meeting? So it's still being recorded.
oh, yeah.
And then,
Suspend.
and then we can have the right to start the confidential.
Happy to do it in the right sequence as long as we have a 5-minute break.
Actually a bit,
Nearly go past 9 o'clock.
we're actually a bit premature. It's only 8:46, but never mind. It's closed at 9. But anyway, we're ahead of time, so that's okay.
We will need.
So what are we at? Is this 23?
See ya.
So the Chief Executive's report, 11.3. Councillor, sorry,
Through you, Mayor, I was on leave, so Bruce Williams was acting CEO of this report.
Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. There is a report tabled in the agenda. I won't speak to all the details. I might just touch on 2 highlights. And there are a number of highlights identified in the report. The Citizenship and Community Awards celebration that we held in late January was a highlight, and it was also pleasing to kick off and confirm our partnership with the Friends of Wombat Hill and kick off the Day Basin project, which is a long-awaited project. There are a number of other highlights tabled in the report. I won't speak to them all. I might just close by saying it's always a privilege, councillors, to lead a dedicated and passionate team and an organisation such as we have, and the trust placed in me to lead the organisation. Know about that. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Now, I've got a motion to receive and note the Chief Officer's report for February 2025. Those that, Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Hewitt. Those in favour? Those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Right. We now move to confidential items. So, councillors, in accordance with section 66 brackets 1 and 66 brackets 2, brackets A of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting to be closed to members of the public, consideration of the following confidential items: appointment of members to the Sustainable Background Advisory Committee. And we're doing that because personal information being information that the police could result in unreasonable disclosure of information about a person or personal affairs. So, got a motion before us. Close the meeting, hear those items. Sorry. Councillor Hewitt. Did you move that?
Yeah.
Councillor Cornish, those in favour? Carried. All right, councillors,
We're standing,
we've got a motion to
Close the meeting,
close standard orders.
close the meeting because we're ready to do it with the.
Well, we can close the orders.
So that's
Standard order.
We've got to do the standing orders. So we suspend standing orders, council. By the motion to suspend standing orders to hear confidential items. Yes, councillor Cornish, councillor Clark. Those in favour?
sorry, through you, Mayor, we've already moved for the confidential items, the standing order, the 5-minute comfort break.
Yes, that's right.
That's what.
So we've got that. So we have a 5-minute comfort break.